I followed her that night, expecting to see a man. I didn't expect what I saw instead. Sarah and I had been married for 7 years. We weren't perfect, but we'd built a life that looked good from the outside. 2 cars in the driveway, a growing restaurant I co-owned with my friend Mark, and enough social invitations to keep our calendar full. Sarah loved that world. She thrived on the charity galas, the polished photos, the whispered deals over champagne. This month, she was buried in preparations for a fundraiser for underprivileged youth. That's what she called it. Every night she was gone late. Every morning she left early. And every time I asked if she was pushing herself too hard, she gave me the same tight smile and said, "It's worth it." That Thursday, she told me she'd be working late again at the event office. But when I checked the shared calendar on her tablet, the location box was blank. No address, no notes. For someone as obsessive about details as Sarah, that was weird. I brushed it off until I saw her getting ready. Not in slacks and a blouse, but in a sleek black dress I'd only seen her wear once, at a political fundraiser 2 years ago. Hair pinned up, red lipstick, diamond earrings. Nothing about it screamed office work. She grabbed her clutch and kissed my cheek. "Don't wait up." I waited just long enough for her car to pull out before I grabbed my jacket and followed. Her Lexus headed uptown, far from the event office she claimed to be going to. She turned into a district lined with private clubs and high-end lounges. I parked 2 blocks back, killed the engine, and walked. The club she entered didn't have a sign, just a polished brass plaque with a name you'd only recognize if you moved in certain circles. 2 men in tailored suits stood by the entrance, checking a guest list. I stayed across the street, leaning against a lamppost, pretending to check my phone. Through the tinted glass, I caught glimpses of her. She was smiling, shaking hands. Then I saw him, Councilman Brooks. I'd served him at the restaurant a few times. He wasn't the kind of man you met by accident. Another politician joined them, one I recognized from a local news scandal that had blown over faster than it should have. The 3 of them leaned in close, voices low, but I could still catch fragments when the door opened for new guests. Deliverables. Leverage. Next transfer. Nothing about fundraising. Nothing about helping kids. Brooks slipped his hand inside his jacket and pulled out an envelope. He passed it to Sarah. She didn't hesitate, didn't even glance around. Just smiled, tucked it into her clutch, and sipped her drink like she'd been expecting it all along. My stomach twisted. I didn't know what was in that envelope, but it wasn't a thank you card. They moved deeper into the club, out of sight. I stood there for a few minutes, trying to piece together what I'd just seen, but every possible explanation sounded worse than the last. I didn't confront her when she got home that night. She walked in around midnight, kicked off her heels, and poured herself a glass of wine. I asked if the event planning was going well. She smiled and said, "Better than I hoped." And all I could think about was that envelope and the way she'd smiled when she took it. Sarah was already gone when I woke up. She'd left her coffee mug in the sink, lipstick marking the rim, and a faint trace of her perfume hung in the kitchen. I tried to shake it off, but I kept replaying the moment Brooks handed her that envelope. It didn't fit with the woman who supposedly spent her nights finalizing seating charts and tracking donations. That afternoon, I spotted something new on the counter. A designer handbag I knew wasn't there yesterday. Glossy leather, gold hardware, a brand I'd only seen in display cases behind glass. "When'd you get this?" I asked that evening. She didn't even look up from her phone. "Gift from a sponsor. They like to thank the committee for our work." "Nice sponsor," I said, running my hand over the bag. The price tag wasn't there, but I didn't need one. This thing cost more than a month's rent when I first opened the restaurant. She smiled faintly. "It's just part of the job, Daniel. You wouldn't believe how generous people can be when they're passionate about a cause." The cause, right? A few days later, the late-night texts started. I'd hear her phone buzz after midnight, the light from the screen spilling under the bedroom door while she took her phone into the bathroom. One night, curiosity got the better of me. When she left it charging in the kitchen, I glanced at the screen. The messages were from names, saved only as initials, B, L, J. The most recent one read, "We need confirmation before Friday. Non-negotiable." At the restaurant, I tried to keep my head in the game. Lunch rushes don't forgive distraction, and Mark had already noticed I wasn't myself. But it was one of my waiters, Mia, who made my stomach tighten again. "Your wife was here earlier," she said casually while stacking menus. "Sat at the corner table on her phone the whole time. Sounded heated. Something about getting the file before Friday or the deal's dead." I felt my jaw clench. "You're sure that's what she said?" Mia nodded. "She wasn't quiet about it." I didn't answer, just thanked her and finished restocking the bar, my mind already spinning. A file, a deadline, and that word again, deal. That night, I called my sister Jenna. She's a freelance journalist, the kind who can smell a story before it's even written. "You think she's cheating?" she asked after I told her about the club, the envelope, the bag, the texts. "I thought I did," I admitted. "Now I'm not so sure. But whatever it is, it's not charity work." There was a pause. "Don't accuse her yet. Get something solid. If you go in half-cocked, she'll spin it, and you'll end up looking paranoid." "You want me to follow her again?" "I want you to watch, listen, and document. Paper trails don't lie." The next few days were a blur of polite small talk and quiet observation. She was careful, no more unexplained dresses or flashy bags. But then, one night, I came home late from the restaurant. The house was quiet, lights dimmed except for the faint glow under the office door. I pushed it open. Sarah jumped, clutching a handful of papers. The shredder beside her was still whirring. Thin strips of paper curled at its mouth. "What are you doing?" I asked. She exhaled sharply. "Donation records. Old ones. I'm clearing space for the new files." At midnight, she smiled tightly. "I'm behind. You know how it is before a big event." I glanced at the shredder bin. No addresses, no donor names, just lines of numbers, columns, and what looked like wire transfer codes. She slid the last sheet in before I could get a closer look. "Want some tea?" she asked, like we hadn't just stood there in silence for 30 seconds too long. "Sure," I said, but my mind was somewhere else entirely. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling while she scrolled through her phone beside me. Every buzz from her messages made me feel like I was one step behind in a game I didn't even know the rules of. But if Jenna was right, and I played this carefully, I'd figure them out soon enough. Jenna didn't waste time. By next week, she had already dug into Sarah's charity filings. We were sitting in her cluttered apartment, laptops open, papers spread out over the coffee table between us. Jenna's style of research was organized chaos. Printouts layered with sticky notes, tabs open by the dozen, and a half-empty mug of coffee that looked like it had been reheated 3 times. "You're going to want to sit down for this," she said, already typing something into her laptop. "I'm already sitting." She ignored me. "The charity's reported income doesn't match what's on the public donation logs. We're talking gaps in the tens of thousands. In some months, more than 50. I frowned. "So, missing money? Or money coming in that never got reported? Which is worse?" She slid a printed spreadsheet across to me. Rows of numbers, columns labeled public pledges, filed income, variance. The variances weren't small, they were glaring. Maybe some donations were in kind? Not cash. Jenna smirked. "That would be cute. But no. And here's where it gets interesting. See these donors? The ones marked anonymous." "Yeah." She leaned back in her chair. "They're not anonymous." I cross-referenced the payment IDs with state campaign finance records. Every single one belongs to a local politician or a political donor with, let's call it, colorful history. My stomach sank. Colorful how? 2 of them are under quiet investigation for zoning fraud. One had a sexual harassment settlement last year. Another's linked to a suspicious land purchase. She tapped the page with her pen. "And your lovely wife is their common connection." I sat back, letting the weight of it sink in. "So she's laundering political bribes through a kid's charity?" Jenna shook her head. "Not exactly. She's trading in information. The money's just the delivery method." She pulled out another folder. This one labeled Gala 2022. Inside were glossy event photos. Sarah in her element, laughing with men in tailored suits and women in glittering gowns. But Jenna's notes weren't about the outfits or decor. She'd circled specific moments. Sarah leading a donor into a curtained confession booth, set up for some kind of sponsor interview. Sarah leaning in close to an executive with her hand on his arm. Sarah disappearing with a state senator for nearly 20 minutes. You ever see one of these booths at the events you've attended? Jenna asked. No. What is that? They pitch it as a get-to-know-the-donors project. Supposedly private chats about why they support the charity. Feel-good stuff. But I've talked to a caterer who worked last year's event. She overheard Sarah asking people about their personal challenges, mistresses, debt, family problems, then promising to help if they supported the cause. I exhaled slowly. Jesus. It's classic social engineering, Jenna continued. People lower their guard at parties, especially if they feel like they're talking to someone with influence. Sarah collects the dirt, then sells it. I finished. Exactly. To Brooks and his network. And they pay her through the charity as anonymous consulting fees. It's elegant. Looks boring on paper, but the leverage it creates. Priceless. I rubbed my temples. How do you even stop something like this? You don't, unless you want to risk getting crushed. But you can take her out of the equation. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. Hosting dinner Friday. Invite whoever you like. I didn't know it yet, but that dinner would cement everything Jenna had told me. Friday night came faster than I wanted. Sarah was in her element. Navy silk dress, perfect hair, diamond earrings I'd never seen before. The dining room was already set when I got home. Candles, crystal glasses, place cards for 12. Big turnout, I asked. She smiled without looking at me. The right people. The guests arrived in waves, 2 council members, a city planning director, the CEO of a construction firm, and a handful of well-dressed spouses. Everyone knew each other, or at least pretended to. The air was thick with polite laughter and wine that cost more than my first car. I played my role, the charming host who kept the wine flowing and the conversation moving. But I was watching, and it didn't take long to see what Jenna meant. The construction CEO kept glancing at Councilman Brooks, his jaw tight. The planning director avoided eye contact with the younger councilman entirely. And when Sarah pulled the city treasurer aside into the hallway, his smile looked more like a grimace. It hit me. Every single person at that table had something to lose, and Sarah knew exactly what it was. Halfway through the main course, she tapped her glass. I want to thank everyone here for supporting our cause, she said, her voice warm but calculated. It means the world to these kids, and to me. She glanced around the table, holding each gaze for just a beat too long, and I realized it wasn't gratitude she was offering. It was a reminder that she held the strings. Jenna's voice echoed in my head. It's not about the money. It's about the leverage. I poured more wine, smiled at the right moments, and played dumb. But inside, I knew this was bigger than I'd thought. It wasn't just dirty donations or political gossip. Sarah had built an entire ecosystem of compromise. When the last guest left and the door clicked shut, Sarah sighed in satisfaction. Good night, she said, brushing past me toward the stairs. Yeah, I muttered. Good night. I waited until I heard the bedroom door close before pulling out my phone and texting Jenna. You were right. All of them. Every single one. She replied almost instantly. Then we start tomorrow. I couldn't go to the police yet. Not without losing everything in the process. If Sarah knew I was onto her, she'd move faster than I could blink. Money would vanish, files would disappear, and every connection she had would turn into a wall I couldn't climb. I needed time, and in the meantime I had to make sure that when she fell, she'd fall alone. That's where Carla came in. Carla had been a friend since college, sharp, sarcastic, and a corporate lawyer who made a living protecting executives from themselves. I called her on a Wednesday afternoon and asked if we could meet in person, somewhere discreet. We ended up in a booth at a small Vietnamese place on the east side. Carla wore her usual uniform. Tailored blazer, hair in a low bun, no-nonsense expression that made you feel like you were about to be billed for every breath you took. You sound like a man about to get divorced, she said, sipping her iced coffee. Maybe. Or maybe I'm just taking precautions. She raised an eyebrow. Precautions usually mean there's something to be afraid of. I leaned in. If I told you my wife was running a blackmail operation disguised as a charity, and that she had access to all our finances, what would you tell me to do? Carla didn't flinch. First, I tell you to stop saying that in public. Second, I tell you to quietly separate your assets before she realizes you're even thinking about it. That's what I need help with. She slid her phone across the table, screen showing a list of steps. You refinance the house, take her off the mortgage. You move any liquid assets into accounts she can't touch. And you document everything because if she tries to claim you hid marital property, you'll need proof you did it for legitimate reasons. Like what? Security concerns, investment opportunities, fraud alerts, all believable, all legal if you play it right. I sat back. How fast can I do this? As fast as you can keep a straight face around her. 2 days later, I told Sarah over breakfast, "Hey, I talked to the bank yesterday. We can refinance the house at a lower rate if we do it now. Lock in before it changes." She was scrolling through her phone, barely looking up. "If you think it's worth it, go ahead. No questions, no hesitation, just blind trust, or maybe she was too distracted to care. Either way, it worked. The papers were signed within a week. The mortgage was now in my name only. Next was the savings. We had one large joint account that we'd built up over the years. That money was her lifeline. She could liquidate it at any time, no questions asked. So I told her I'd been offered a guaranteed return through a supplier connection at the restaurant. Short-term investment, I said. Just a few months. How much? She asked, stirring her tea. Half the account. The rest stays put, just in case. She frowned. Half. It's a high-yield opportunity, Sarah. I'd be stupid not to take it. There was a pause, a flicker in her eyes, but then she nodded. Fine. You're the numbers guy. The transfer went through the next day. That money wasn't coming back to any account she could touch. The last move was the riskiest, freezing the rest of our joint accounts. I waited until she was at a charity luncheon and called the bank, reporting suspicious withdrawals. I kept my tone just right, concerned but calm, as if I'd seen a minor issue that needed quick resolution. By the time Sarah tried to use her card that evening, it was declined. She came home furious. Do you know my card isn't working? Yeah, I said, closing my laptop. I called the bank. There were a couple of odd withdrawals. Probably nothing, but I didn't want to take chances until they verify. Her voice sharpened. What withdrawals? Some small charges out of state. Could be fraud. I'll call tomorrow and clear it up. She stood there for a moment, studying me like she was trying to read my mind. Then she muttered, fine, and stormed upstairs. That's when I noticed the shift. Sarah became different, more secretive. She started taking her phone everywhere, even to the bathroom. Calls got shorter, sharper. The late nights became more frequent. But now she came home wired, tense, snapping at little things. One night, I caught her in the office at midnight, shoving a folder into her bag. What's that? I asked from the doorway. She spun around. Donation records. In the middle of the night? It's easier to work when I'm not being questioned. Her tone was cold enough to frost glass. I played along, but inside I could feel the clock ticking. She was moving pieces I couldn't see yet, and I didn't know if she was accelerating her game or just reacting to mine. Jenna called me the next morning. I've been thinking, she said. If she senses anything's wrong, she'll try to secure her own assets. You need to be ready for that. I already am. You think you are, Jenna said. But Sarah doesn't play fair. If she realizes you're pulling away, she'll hit first. Hard. I looked out the window at Sarah loading her car in the driveway, talking to someone on speakerphone. Her hand was waving sharply in the air, her body language agitated. I know, I said quietly. That's why I'm not done yet. It wasn't just about money anymore, it was about survival. Every step I took had to look like business as usual, even as I built walls around myself brick by brick. The thing about playing for time is that it only works if the other person doesn't know they're running out of it. Sarah still thought she was in control. For now. By the time Jenna's exposé was ready, everything was in position. The article hit the site at 6 a.m. sharp. No teasers, no slow build, Jenna went straight for the jugular. Headline, Charity for Sale. How Political Secrets Are Bought and Sold in This City. The lead photo was a shot of Sarah from last year's gala, hand on Councilman Brooks' arm, smiling like they were old friends. Underneath, the story cut through the glossy PR veneer and laid out every thread we'd been following. Mismatched donation records, anonymous consulting fees funneled through the charity, and a list of compromised donors long enough to make anyone sweat. By 6:15, my phone was vibrating off the nightstand. Sarah sat up, groggy, reaching for her own phone. "Why is everyone calling me this early?" she muttered. Then she saw the screen. Her hand froze. Her face went pale. I watched her scroll, eyes darting, jaw tightening. "What the hell is this?" she snapped. I took a slow sip of coffee. "Looks like someone's been busy." Her head snapped toward me. "You knew about this? About you running a blackmail ring?" "Yeah, I had a hunch." She stared like she couldn't decide whether to scream or throw the phone at my head. Another call came in. Then another. She answered one, voice dripping with fake composure. "Hello? No, of course it's not true. It's a smear campaign. Political season. You know how it is." Whoever was on the other end wasn't buying it. I could tell by the way her voice kept getting higher, faster, sharper. By 7 a.m., she'd taken a dozen calls. The tone shifted from defensive to frantic. Brooks' name came up again and again, donors wanting to know if the article meant he was finished too. That's when the next blow landed. Brooks released a public statement denying all involvement, painting himself as an innocent who had unwittingly supported an organization under false pretenses. Translation: he'd cut her loose before she could drag him down. Sarah's panic became rage. "He's lying. He was in on every—" She stopped, realizing I was still in the room. "Never mind." At 9:30, she slammed her laptop shut and grabbed her purse. "I'm going to the bank." I leaned against the counter. "Need me to drive you?" No, her voice was sharp enough to draw blood. An hour later, she came back, moving like she was about to tear the door off the hinges. "You emptied the accounts." I set my mug down. "Correction. I secured them." "You stole my money." "Our money," I said evenly. "The money you would have drained to cover your mess. I just made sure it stayed where it belongs." Her eyes were blazing. "You think you can just take everything?" "No, Sarah. I think I can take what's mine. The rest was already gone. You spent it buying yourself into rooms you didn't belong in." For a moment, she just stood there, breathing hard. Then her voice dropped. "You have no idea what you've done." "I know exactly what I've done." Her laugh was bitter. "You think Jenna's little article will fix anything? You think taking the money means you've won? They're going to come after me. And when they do, they won't care if you were involved or not." That last line hung in the air like smoke. She wasn't wrong. The kind of people who'd been feeding her secrets wouldn't just shrug and walk away. But I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of seeing me flinch. "I'll take my chances," I said. The rest of the day was a blur of fallout. Jenna's article went viral, picked up by bigger outlets. Donors started issuing public statements, either distancing themselves from Sarah or threatening lawsuits. Sarah's phone never stopped ringing, but by afternoon, she stopped answering. The confident, high-society version of my wife had vanished, replaced by someone smaller, cornered. She tried one last move that evening, a series of rapid-fire transfers from our business accounts. She didn't know I'd already changed all the passwords. By the time she came storming into the kitchen again, she was shaking. "Where is it? Where's what?" "The money, Daniel. Don't play dumb." I leaned on the counter. "Safe. From you." Her lips curled. "You think I married you for the money?" "No," I said. "I think you married me because I was useful. And when I stopped being useful, you thought you could use me as collateral." She stepped closer, eyes locked on mine. "You've just made yourself a very dangerous enemy." I didn't move. "So have you." We stood there, 10 seconds of silence that felt like 10 years. Then she turned on her heel and walked out. I watched from the window as she threw a suitcase in the trunk and sped away without looking back. By nightfall, the network she'd built was gone. Brooks was untouchable behind his wall of denials. Her so-called friends had cut her off to save themselves. And Sarah was broke, disgraced, and alone. I didn't celebrate, not yet, because I knew this wasn't the end. Just the moment she realized she'd lost the game she thought she was winning. 2 days later, Sarah packed her bags without saying a word. No fight, no tears, just the sound of zippers and drawers opening in the bedroom. I stood in the kitchen, drinking my coffee, listening to the muffled thuds of her moving around. It felt almost anticlimactic after everything, like watching the last act of a play when the audience has already gone home. By noon, she was gone, or so I thought. That evening, Jenna sent me a text. "Thought you should see this." Attached was a blurry phone pic of Sarah at a downtown pawn shop. She was leaning over the counter, sliding a tray of jewelry toward the clerk. I recognized half the pieces: diamond bracelets, a sapphire ring, a gold pendant she'd worn to every gala for the past 2 years. I also recognized the clerk's expression. He wasn't impressed. Turned out most of those gifts from donors were now evidence in an active investigation. Their serial numbers were flagged, their histories logged. The clerk stalled her until an investigator arrived, took statements, and confiscated the lot. She walked out with nothing but the purse she'd brought in. By the next day, she checked into a motel on the edge of town. One of those places with flickering signs and curtains that never quite close. I didn't go there, didn't need to. Word traveled fast in this city, especially when you've just been publicly dismantled. I figured I wouldn't see her again. But then, a week later, she showed up at the house. It was early evening. I was on the porch going through mail when a car pulled into the driveway. Sarah stepped out, wearing sunglasses even though the sun was already dipping low. She didn't walk up to me right away, just opened the back door and pulled out a single cardboard box. "I came for my things," she said. "They're in the garage," I replied. We walked there in silence. The box was already waiting. A few framed photos, some books, a scarf she used to wear in winter. Nothing valuable, nothing worth arguing over. She glanced inside, then closed the lid without touching anything. "Daniel," she said my name like she was testing it. "You've made your point. You've humiliated me, taken the money, made sure I have nothing. Congratulations." I didn't answer. "I know you think I deserve it. Maybe I do. But you have to understand, I wasn't just doing this for me. We could have had everything. Power, influence, money beyond anything you've imagined. I was building something bigger than both of us." I shook my head. "You were building a noose, and you were putting it around both our necks." She stepped closer. "I loved you, Daniel. Maybe not in the way you wanted, but I did. And if you think taking everything from me is going to make you whole, you're wrong. You'll wake up one day and realize you've just been standing guard over an empty vault." I met her eyes. "I'd rather guard nothing than live chained to you." She stared at me for a long moment, lips pressed together like she was holding back words she couldn't afford to say. Then she picked up the box. "Goodbye, Daniel. Goodbye, Sarah." I watched her walk back to the car. No parting glance, no hesitation. Just the sound of the trunk slamming shut, the engine starting, and the taillights fading down the street. Inside, the house was quiet. Too quiet, maybe, but it was mine. And she was out there with almost nothing. No network, no allies, no money that wasn't under scrutiny. I locked the door. Whatever came next, it wouldn't involve her. What would you have done if you found your spouse was running a blackmail ring? Think I went too far taking everything before going public? Let me know in the comments. And if you want more betrayal stories, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next one.